if you think about it, like, that's not something I'd want to think about, though. If worst comes to worst.
Worst comes to worst.
Yes.
I'm
He's like going to jail.
Nah, dude, I'm not going to jail.
How are you boxed? People do this.
A reference angle is the acute angle
No.
formed with the x-axis. Olivia is right that if you were struggling to have food on a consistent basis and a place to live, that you might find prison to be an option, where at least you have shelter, at least you have food. But we do try to make sure that we have shelters in place as well for people who are struggling. And there are great resources available to people who maybe need food, maybe need jobs, things like that. One of the biggest issues that faces our homeless population is, number one, not being able to communicate, say not being able to read, write, speak English. That's always a hard one. Another one is drug addiction. Chemical dependency is a huge issue that leads to homelessness. And then finally, mental health issues. There are some people who struggle severely with some, for example, you might have a condition that is not being treated properly and you struggle to maintain any type of consistency or relationships and that piece. So those are kind of the three major things that lead to that. So acute angle formed with the angle and the x-axis is a reference angle. Today's a super easy assignment, a super easy lesson. We need to do it so we can prepare for what we're going to do tomorrow. You have a test in 1 week from tomorrow, and you'll be done with third quarter trigonometry. So if you have a test you want to retake or do something like that, come see me sooner rather than later. Suppose that we have an angle of 30 degrees. The angle formed against the x-axis is 30 degrees. That is the reference angle. Suppose that I draw a different angle. Suppose I draw an angle that is 130 degrees. What is the angle formed against the x-axis over here? How'd you get 50, Cyrus? Has to add up to 180, so you say that the difference is going to be 50 degrees. 50 degrees is the reference angle there. You're always going against the x-axis, never against the y-axis. So I'll demonstrate here. Suppose you had a 260-degree angle. You see how a lot of people might look against the y-axis and say, oh, that's just a small 10-degree angle. We don't look against the y-axis. You always look against the x-axis. So how many degrees do you turn to get from 180 to 260? 80. So there's an 80-degree reference angle. And finally, if you had an angle of 340 degrees, how many degrees are left over to get to 360? 20 degrees. So it's a 20-degree reference angle. So we're going to do a couple examples in class, and then you guys will be able to work, and you'll be done, and that'll be that. So you tell me which quadrant, 125 degrees. Second quadrant. So since it's in the second quadrant, I'm going to compare it against 180. So how many degrees are between 125 and 180? 55. Very good. 200 places you in which quadrant? Into the third quadrant. $20-degree reference angle because it's 20 degrees from 180 to 200. 37 degrees is in which quadrant? The first quadrant. So you have a 37-degree reference angle. Don't make the easy ones any more difficult than they need to be. 342, wow, that's a big number. Which quadrant is that going to be in? It is in the fourth quadrant. We have 342, so we're not going to compare it against 0. We're not going to compare it against 180. This gets compared to 360. And how many degrees between 342 and 360? 18, so that's an 18-degree reference angle. 275, which quadrant is 275? That's also in the fourth quadrant because 270 is at the bottom. So therefore, this would just be a 5-degree reference angle, right?
No.
There's just 5 degrees right here, right?
No.
That's against the y-axis. You're looking against the x-axis. How many degrees against the x-axis? 85.
You're so sneaky, Mr. Gantz.
I do try to be sneaky sometimes.
It didn't work though.
Didn't work. Next one, a 95-degree angle. We want to compute the reference angle. That's in the second quadrant. Again, you have that skinny little space that sits up against the y-axis, but we are looking at this angle right there. Anybody know? That's also 85 degrees. How are the next two different?
They're negative.
They're negative, and so your reference angle will still be positive, but let me show you how to think about this. Negative 116, that would be, let's see, this is negative 90. This would be negative 180. So negative 116 would be about right there, okay? So negative 116. So I just want to think of how many additional degrees would you turn to get from 116 to 180? 64 degrees. Your reference angle will always be positive. And then I have negative 493. Oh boy, that one's tough, huh? Watch how I count this off. Negative 90, negative 180, then what? Negative 270. How about after negative 270? Negative 360. How about after negative 360? Negative 450. How about after negative 450? Negative 540. So we're somewhere between negative 450 and negative 540. So which quadrant are we in? Yeah, we're in that third quadrant. Negative 493. So I need to compare negative 493 to negative 540. I'm looking for the angle that I would turn to get there. I'd have to turn 40 degrees to get from 500 to 540, and then an additional 7. So I'm going to count 47 degrees here.
Are you gonna want like the arrows, like?
No, I'm just trying to help you guys see how I got to where I am.
Where is this in our homework?
I'll show you. And last one, 181 degrees. What's that reference angle? 1 degree. I forgot to put this into your homework. Is that even allowed? Like if it's not in there, does that just mean
I
it
thought we
gets
only ripped
accepted?
stuff out. I don't think we can add
Is
things.
that-
I think we can
You
only.
can only rip stuff out, can't add like another staple, can we?
Nope, that's not allowed
Should we,
actually.
should we vote on it?
No.
As long as you take it out of the test.
See, sometimes people think this is a democracy. It is not. This is a
I'm just-
dictatorship.
I was just joking around. No need to get upset.
No, I don't get
I was
upset.
just joking.
Every day I allow you to come in here and pontificate about whatever nonsense you want to speak of.
We have so much extra time. It's just like, what else are you gonna do? Sit here in silence? Do you want these turned in?
That'll be the last thing that we do, yeah.
Well, sometimes, Mr. Gantz, you're like, you can turn this in on test day for extra points. And then on test day, I'm like, can I turn this in? You're like, no, I'm not taking it. So you tricked me.
You sure can. Yeah, I'd appreciate if you just staple this to the back. You want me to send the stapler
And I'm
around?
pretty sure I'm the only one that's like, are we turning this in? And then you're like, no.
You want me to know?